I found out my husband had been hiding big decisions about our life from me, and it made me feel betrayed, shocked, and unsure if I could ever trust him with my heart again. I'm writing this because I need to get it out of my head before it destroys what's left of me. 3 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Today, I'm sitting in a studio apartment that smells like old carpet and regret, wondering how I became the villain in my own story. It started when I found the bank statements hidden in David's desk drawer. Not just any statements, accounts I'd never heard of, investment portfolios, a second savings account, money being moved around like chess pieces in a game I wasn't even playing. 22 years of marriage, and he'd been making financial decisions without me for the last 5. The house we were going to renovate. He'd already gotten 3 contractor quotes and put down a deposit. The vacation to Italy I thought we were planning together. He'd booked flights for a different week than what we discussed because the prices were better. When I confronted him, David looked at me like I was being dramatic. I was trying to surprise you with the renovation, he said. And I handle the finances anyway, so what's the big deal? What's the big deal? I felt like I'd been married to a stranger. Every major decision that affected our life together, and he'd been treating me like a child who needed to be managed, rather than a partner who deserved a voice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times he'd redirected conversations about money, all the times he'd said, "Don't worry about it, I've got it handled." I thought he was being protective. Turns out, he was being controlling. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in over 2 decades of marriage. I called in sick to work and drove to my sister's house to vent. Maybe he was trying to be romantic with the renovation surprise, Sarah said, but even she looked uncomfortable. For 5 years, Sarah, he's been hiding financial decisions for 5 years. What else don't I know? That's when she told me about her friend Mark, who was going through a divorce. He said the same thing happened to him, except it was his wife. Said the betrayal of finding out someone's been making life decisions without you is almost worse than infidelity. Infidelity. The word hung in the air like smoke. Policed with cheating, you know where you stand, I said. This feels like I've been sleepwalking through my own life. Sarah suggested I talk to Mark, get perspective from someone who understood. She said he was a good listener, going through something similar. Just coffee, just talking. I should have said no. Instead, I texted a complete stranger because my husband had made me feel like a ghost in my own marriage. Mark suggested we meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory, just 2 people trying to make sense of how their spouses had rewritten their lives without permission. I told myself it was therapeutic. I told myself David had pushed me to this by treating me like I didn't matter. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true. The coffee shop was warm and crowded. Mark was nothing like David, where my husband was reserved and calculated. Mark was animated and present. He listened to every word like it mattered. When I told him about the hidden bank accounts, he actually looked angry on my behalf. "That's not protecting you," he said. That for the first time in months, someone validated how I felt. David had spent weeks telling me I was overreacting, that I should be grateful he handled everything so I didn't have to worry. Mark made me feel like my feelings were legitimate. We talked for 3 hours. About trust. About feeling invisible in our own marriages. About how betrayal doesn't always look like lipstick on a collar. Sometimes it looks like finding out your life partner has been treating you like a tenant instead of an owner. When we said goodbye, Mark hugged me. It lasted maybe 2 seconds longer than it should have. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in weeks. For the first time since finding those bank statements, I didn't feel crazy. I felt heard. David was in his office when I got home, door closed, probably moving more money around without telling me. I didn't even try to talk to him. What was the point? That night, Mark texted me, "Thanks for today. It helped to talk to someone who gets it." I stared at that text for 20 minutes before responding. "Thank you for listening, I needed that." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Want to grab lunch tomorrow? I know a quiet place where we can actually hear each other talk." I should have said no. I should have deleted his number. I should have fought harder for my marriage before looking for understanding in someone else's eyes. Instead, I said yes. That yes was the first domino in a chain that would destroy everything I'd built in 22 years. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that someone finally made me feel like I mattered, and I was starving for that feeling. The next day I told David I was meeting a friend for lunch. Technically it wasn't a lie. Mark was becoming a friend who understood me in ways my husband apparently couldn't. What I didn't realize was that understanding can be more dangerous than attraction. Because when someone really sees you after years of feeling invisible, it's intoxicating. And I was already addicted. The lunch turned into dinners. The dinners turned into long drives where we'd park by the lake and talk until midnight. The talks turned into something I told myself was still just friendship, even when Mark started touching my hand when he laughed at my jokes. For 2 months, I lived in this bubble where I had the perfect justification for everything. David had betrayed my trust first. David had made me feel worthless in my own marriage. David had pushed me into the arms of someone who actually appreciated me. I was a master at mental gymnastics. Mark was everything David wasn't. Spontaneous where David was rigid. Emotionally available where David was distant. Present where David was always thinking 3 steps ahead without including me. "Your husband doesn't deserve you," Mark would say, and I'd feel this rush of validation that was better than any drug. The first time he kissed me, we were sitting in his car after dinner. I'd been complaining about how David had signed us up for a financial planning seminar without asking me first. "He treats you like you don't have a brain," Mark said, and then his hand was on my cheek, and then his lips were on mine. And for 30 seconds, I felt more alive than I had in years. I pulled away shaking. "I can't. I'm married. To someone who doesn't respect you, Mark said softly. When's the last time he made you feel beautiful? When's the last time he asked what you wanted instead of telling you what he'd already decided? I couldn't answer because the truth was devastating. David hadn't made me feel beautiful in years, and he never asked what I wanted because he'd convinced himself he already knew. That night, I went home and tried to my husband. I put on the nightgown I'd worn on our honeymoon, lit candles, opened wine. David walked into the bedroom, looked at me like I'd lost my mind and said, "What's all this about?" Not, "You look beautiful." Not, "What a nice surprise." "What's all this about?" Like romance was a foreign concept that required explanation. "I thought we could reconnect," I said, feeling ridiculous. "I have that early meeting tomorrow, and you know I can't sleep when there's candles burning. Can we do this another night?" He kissed my forehead like I was his sister and went to brush his teeth. I blew out the candles, the nightgown in the hamper, and cried myself to sleep. The next day Mark texted asking how I was doing. I told him about the night before, and he called me immediately. "That's not normal," he said. "That's not how someone treats the person they love." "Maybe I'm being too sensitive," I said, but even I didn't believe it anymore. "No, you're being human. You're asking for basic affection from your husband, and he's treating you like an inconvenience." That weekend Mark and I met at a hotel bar an hour outside of town. Just drinks, we said. Just talking, we said. But we both knew what was really happening. I'd bought new underwear. I'd shaved my legs. I'd told David I was having a girls' night with Sarah and wouldn't be home until late. The lies came so easily it scared me. Mark looked at me like I was the most fascinating person in the world. We talked about books, about dreams we'd given up, about who we used to be before marriage made us smaller versions of ourselves. I forgot I was funny. I told him and he laughed. "You're hilarious. And smart, and beautiful. How does your husband not see that?" "He sees it." I lied. "He's just not good at expressing it." "When someone loves you, you don't have to guess," Mark said. "You don't have to beg for attention or decode their feelings. You just know." He was right, and that knowledge was like acid in my chest. We went up to his room. I told myself we were just going to talk privately. I told myself I was still a good person who would stop before anything really happened. I told myself a lot of lies that night. But when Mark kissed me in that hotel room, when he whispered that I was beautiful, when he looked at me like I was precious instead of tolerated, I stopped lying to myself about what I wanted. What happened next lasted 3 hours and destroyed 22 years. Afterward, lying in that hotel bed, I felt like I was floating and drowning at the same time. Euphoric because someone had wanted me that desperately. Horrified because I'd become someone I'd always judged. "I should go," I whispered. "Not yet," Mark said, pulling me closer. "Just stay a little longer." So I stayed. And we talked about how this felt like the most natural thing in the world. How we'd found each other at exactly the right time. How sometimes the universe gives you what you need when you least expect it. All the beautiful lies people tell themselves when they're destroying their lives. I got home at 2 a.m. David was asleep, snoring softly, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife had just blown up their marriage. I showered for 40 minutes, trying to wash off the guilt and the smell of betrayal, but some stains go deeper than skin. The next morning, David made coffee and asked how girls' night was. "Fine," I said, and he nodded and went back to reading his phone. If he'd looked at me, really looked, he might have seen something was wrong. He might have asked more questions. He might have fought for us. But David had never been good at seeing what was right in front of him. For 3 weeks, I lived this double life. Loving wife during the day, Mark's lover 3 nights a week. I was on the attention, on feeling desired, on finally being someone's priority. I convinced myself I deserved this. David had betrayed me first by hiding all those financial decisions. This was just evening the score. But karma doesn't care about your justifications, and the universe has a way of making sure the truth always comes out. The text message that destroyed everything came on a Tuesday morning while I was making David's coffee. My phone was on the counter, and when it lit up, both of us saw it. "Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful. You're all I think about." Time stopped. David's face went through about 6 different expressions before landing on something I'd never seen before. Not anger. Not complete and total devastation. "Who is that?" he asked, and his voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear it. I could have lied. Could have said it was spam or a wrong number. But looking at my husband's face, seeing 22 years of trust crumble in real time, the words just came out. "His name is Mark." David sat down at the kitchen table like his legs had given out. He stared at me for what felt like hours. "How long?" he finally asked. 3 months. 3 months. He repeated it like he was trying to understand a foreign language. "Since you found the bank statements." I nodded, and something in his expression shifted. The devastation hardened into something calder. "So this is my fault. I drove you to this. You made me feel invisible," I said, hating how defensive I sounded. "You made decisions about our life without including me. You treated me like I didn't matter. So you decided to sleep with someone else." When he said it like that, with no yelling, just flat facts, it sounded exactly as pathetic as it was. "David, don't." He held up his hand. "Just don't." He went upstairs. I heard drawers opening and closing. When he came back down, he had a suitcase. "Where are you going, hotel? I can't look at you right now. We need to talk about this." He laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. "Talk about what?" "About how my wife of 22 years decided to handle her marital problems by finding someone else to handle her. About how instead of fighting for our marriage, you would away for some guy you've known for 3 months. It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" "Jennifer, explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the second things got hard between us, you went looking for someone else to make you feel better." I couldn't explain it because he was right. The moment I felt unheard in my marriage, I'd opened the door for someone else instead of David's door down until he listened. I was lonely. I whispered. So was I, he said. You think hiding those financial decisions was about controlling you? I was trying to handle everything so you wouldn't worry. I thought I was protecting you. But instead of telling me I was failing as a husband, you decided to find a replacement. The word replacement hit like a slap, because that's exactly what Mark had been. A substitute for everything I thought David wasn't giving me. I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen. For 3 months, it happened. 3 months of looking me in the eye every morning and lying. 3 months of coming home to me after being with him. 3 months of letting me think we had problems we could fix when you'd already checked out. David picked up his suitcase and walked toward the door. Where does this leave us? I asked. He turned around, and for a second, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with 24 years ago. The man I'd just destroyed. I don't know, he said. I don't know if there's an us anymore. The door closed, and I was alone in the house we'd built together, surrounded by the wreckage of the life I'd blown up for someone else's attention. I called Mark sobbing. He came over within an hour. He left. I told him. He knows everything. Maybe this is good, Mark said, holding me. Maybe this is the universe clearing the path for us to be together. But even as he said it, something felt different. Without the thrill of secrecy, without the forbidden nature of what we were doing, Mark seemed smaller somehow. Less important. Over the next 2 weeks, everything fell apart faster than I could process. David filed for separation. Sarah stopped returning my calls after David told her what happened. My mother, who'd always adored David, listened to my explanation in silence and then said, I don't understand how you could do this to such a good man. My coworkers started treating me differently after David's best friend worked in the same building and word got around. Not openly hostile, just distant. Like infidelity was contagious. The worst part was running into people who knew both of us. The grocery store became a minefield. Church was impossible. Our neighborhood felt like enemy territory. Mark tried to be supportive, but without the stolen moments and secret texts, our relationship felt hollow. What we'd had was built on drama and forbidden excitement. Take away the affair part, and we were just two people who'd used each other to avoid dealing with our real problems. Maybe we should take a break, he said after a particularly awkward dinner where we'd run out of things to talk about. Let you figure things out with David. David won't even see me, I said. His lawyer said he wants to go straight to divorce. Maybe that's for the best. The casual way he said it made my run cold. This man who 3 weeks ago was telling me I was the love of his life was already backing away now that he couldn't be the hero rescuing me from my marriage. I left my husband for you, I said. No, Mark replied. You left your husband because you were unhappy. I was just there. Like he was a convenience store that happened to be open when I needed something. That's when I realized what I'd really done. I hadn't found love. I hadn't found my soulmate. I'd found a distraction from the hard work of fixing my marriage, and I'd paid for it with everything that actually mattered. 3 months later, I'm living in this studio apartment, splitting my belongings with a man who used to be my best friend, and now can't stand to be in the same room as me. Mark and I lasted exactly 6 weeks after David left. Turns out, when you build a relationship on betraying someone else, trust doesn't come easily. Who would have thought? I see David sometimes at the coffee shop where we used to go on Sunday mornings. He looks good, peaceful, even. Like a weight has been lifted from his shoulders. He started wearing contacts instead of glasses, and he's joined a hiking group. Last week, I saw him there with a woman. She was laughing at something he said, touching his arm, looking at him like he was fascinating. The way I used to look at Mark. The way I stopped looking at David somewhere along the way. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. Because she was looking at my ex-husband the way he deserved to be looked at. The way I should have been looking at him instead of searching for validation in someone else's eyes. I lost 22 years of marriage, my home, most of my friends, and my family's respect for 3 months of feeling special. I traded a man who loved me imperfectly for a man who loved the idea of me temporarily. The worst part isn't the loneliness or the judgment or even the regret. It's knowing that I had everything I actually wanted. I just didn't realize it until I'd thrown it away for something that felt better in the moment. David wasn't perfect. He should have included me in those financial decisions. He should have been more romantic, more present, more aware of my needs. But I should have fought for us instead of fighting with someone else. Some mistakes you can come back from. Some bridges you can rebuild. And some choices echo so loudly that they drown out everything else for the rest of your life. I destroyed my marriage because my husband made me feel invisible, only to discover that the real way to disappear is to become someone even you can't respect looking at in the mirror.